3 years ago, my neighbor took 4 acres of land my grandfather had cleared with his own hands back in 1948. Last Tuesday, he stood on my front porch wearing a suit that hung loose on his shoulders, his hat clutched in both hands, asking me to buy the very house he'd built on that land. Not because he liked me, because I was the only person left who could save him, but to understand why I need to take you back to where it all began. Please like, share, and subscribe this video. My name is Roy Coleman. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent every year of my life on the same 80 acres just outside Macon, Georgia. My grandfather bought this farm in 1948 after working 2 jobs for nearly a decade. Every fence post, every pasture, every stretch of creek meant something to him because he'd earned every inch of it. My father was born in the back bedroom of the old farmhouse that's still standing today. 28 years later, I was born in that very same room. I'm not a wealthy man. I raise cattle, I mend my own fences, and every Sunday evening I carry a cup of coffee out to the oak tree my grandfather planted the week my father came into the world. That tree matters more to this story than you might expect. 7 years ago, a man named Dale Pruitt bought the 15 acres bordering mine. He seemed friendly enough. The first Christmas, he stopped by with a bottle of bourbon. The first spring, he helped me pull a calf that got stuck in the mud. If someone had told me then that he'd someday take part of my family's land, I would have laughed them off my porch. It started the way most bad things do, small enough to ignore. One morning I noticed our shared fence line looked different, not by much, maybe 6 feet where the property met the creek. When I asked Dale about it, he shrugged. "Creek banks shift," he said. "Old fence posts don't stay put forever. I just moved them back where they belonged." It sounded reasonable. After all, my father always said a good neighbor deserves the benefit of the doubt before he deserves a lawsuit. So I let it go. 6 feet became 12. 12 became 20. Before long, Dale wasn't just moving fence posts anymore. He was mowing grass on my side of the line. Then he fenced it. Then he poured concrete for a small equipment shed. Eventually, the land he claimed included the old oak tree, and the only creek crossing my cattle depended on during dry summers. The day I confronted him, he didn't argue. He reached into his truck and handed me a business card, a real estate attorney. That's when I realized this hadn't happened by accident. It had been planned. Later, my own attorney explained what Dale was trying to do. He wasn't claiming 2 years of mowing suddenly made the land his. His lawyer argued that decades of conflicting rural surveys, an aging fence line, and years of open use had created enough uncertainty that the boundary itself should be treated differently. What looked like an innocent fence repair had actually been the first move in a very expensive legal game. My grandfather had always believed patience built trust. Dale had found a way to turn patience into evidence. Losing land doesn't happen all at once. It happens an inch at a time. Like watching the tide slowly swallow a sandcastle you spent all afternoon building, you never notice the exact moment it's gone. One day you simply look up, and something that had always been part of your life no longer belongs to you. The case dragged on for 14 months. By the time it was over, I'd spent nearly $30,000 I didn't have on lawyers, surveyors, and expert witnesses. The hardest part wasn't writing the checks. It was listening to professionals explain that old rural property lines aren't always as clear as the people who first walked them. Attorney looked me square in the eye and said, "Roy, sometimes the law isn't deciding who's right. It's deciding what it can still prove." That sentence stayed with me. Linda picked up extra shifts at the pharmacy just to keep us afloat. More than once, I wondered if I should have let Dale keep those first 6 feet of creek bank and saved us all the heartache. Linda never once agreed. She'd squeeze my hand across the dinner table and remind me, "If you stop fighting now, you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you hadn't." Most evenings after court, I'd sit alone in the courthouse hallway, staring at the floor while the building slowly emptied. That's when I'd hear my father's voice in my head. "Paper outlives promises, Roy. Always keep your paper." So I did. Every survey, every deed, every tax map, every letter, every photograph of that fence line dating back to 1990. I never knew which one might matter. I only knew my father would have kept every single one. In the end, the judge ruled neither side had proven every inch beyond doubt. Old surveys conflicted. Fence lines had shifted over generations. County maps didn't agree with handwritten deeds. The court established a new legal boundary. Dale walked away with 4 acres, the oak tree, the creek crossing, and the part of the farm my grandfather loved most. I walked away with what remained, and a savings account that looked almost as empty as I felt. Within a year, Dale built the house he'd always dreamed about. 6 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the creek that used to water my cattle. Sometimes I'd see him sitting on that porch after sunset. Other evenings he'd wave. I'd wave back. My father used to say, "Bitterness is a mortgage on a life you haven't lived yet." I wasn't interested in making those payments. 3 years later, a for sale sign appeared in Dale's front yard. Around town, people whispered that his equipment business had collapsed. Bad contracts, rising interest rates, a bank that finally ran out of patience. He needed to sell quickly. At first, it looked like he had buyers, then they disappeared. Another offer came. That one fell apart too. A month later, I ran into my attorney at the feed store. He smiled when he saw me. "Roy," he said, "don't be surprised if your phone rings soon." I frowned. Why would Dale call me? He chuckled. "Because you're the only person who can help him." Every lender that reviewed the property reached the same conclusion. The boundary dispute had left the title too complicated. The legal description still referenced competing surveys. No bank wanted to finance a house tangled in years of litigation. Cash buyers didn't want the risk either. The very legal strategy Dale had relied on to win the land had made the property almost impossible to sell. Then my attorney looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "The only clean path forward starts with you." For the first time in 3 years, I realized the story wasn't over. The knock came the following Tuesday. I opened the door. Dale stood there wearing an old suit that no longer fit him. His hat rested in both hands. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked up. "I guess your father was right." I looked at him. "About what?" He swallowed. "Paper outlives promises." I hadn't expected to hear those words from him, not ever. He didn't ask me for a favor. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply asked if I'd consider buying the property. I didn't remind him about the 14 months, or the $30,000, or the sleepless nights. Time had already done enough reminding for both of us. I offered him a fair price, less than market value, but fair. He nodded before I'd even finished speaking. We signed the papers at my kitchen table, the same table where my father signed our farm deed more than 60 years earlier. The first Sunday after everything was finished, I carried my coffee back beneath that old oak tree. The shade felt exactly the same. The creek sounded exactly the same for the first time in years. The farm felt whole again. Dale moved 2 counties away that spring. Last I heard, he was managing equipment for another farmer. I don't know whether you'd call that justice. I only know the land found its way home. Some things aren't won back through anger. They're won back by simply staying long enough to see the story finish itself. Have you ever gotten back something you thought was gone forever?